welcome. I'm Geeta Mohan and you're watching India Today Global. There's some news coming in at the top of this bulletin. Hours before US President Donald Trump and Ukraine President Zelenskyy meet, Trump spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin as he considers Ukraine's push for long-range missiles. That's the news that's just coming in on his social media platform, Truth Social. He posted, and I quote him, "I'm speaking to President Putin now. The conversation is ongoing, a lengthy one, and I will report the context as will President Putin at its conclusion." He was posting this even as the conversation between President Trump and President Putin was underway. That's the big news coming in. There's a lot that can be expected of the conversations because it happens ahead of the meeting between President Trump and President Zelenskyy of Ukraine. And yes, Tomahawks, long-range missiles, are being considered for Ukraine by the United States of America. Also, a lot of push when it comes to President Trump and the other countries, particularly India, where he spoke yesterday and he said that US is looking at India stopping Russian oil imports, that they can start or restart engaging Russia once the war is over. So very determined US president over here looking at ensuring that he manages forward movement, at least in brokering a deal between Russia and Ukraine. This comes days after the Israel-Hamas peace brokered by none other than the United States of America itself. Rohit Sharma, my colleague, joins me from Washington, D.C. Rohit, thank you so much for joining me. President Trump posting this even as the conversation was underway. What are the details? Is the conversation over?
Geeta, can you repeat your question? Sorry, I think something is off. I couldn't hear you.
Rohit, I was just saying that President Trump was posting what he just posted even while the conversation was underway. So is the conversation over? Are there any details that are emerging?
Well, I think he wanted to give a heads up to everybody. And I think this is classic President Trump. He wants everybody to know that he's delivering for American people. It was a long conversation. Their conversations have lasted for hours and hours in the past. So he wanted to ensure that American people can understand that he's working hard. And we do have President Zelenskyy, who's going to be in Washington, D.C. tomorrow. So I think it was President Trump's way of, letting everybody know that he's ahead of the curve. He's trying to get a peace deal done. And he's, in fact, talking to President Vladimir Putin, details of which in the readouts, which will be handed out to us pretty soon.
Right, Rohit, stay on with us. That's one of the big stories, but there's another one. US President Donald Trump is back with his India's Russian oil purchase rhetoric, and this time he claimed that Prime Minister Narendra Modi assured him that India will stop buying Russian oil. However, India has rejected Trump's claim, stating that its energy policy will continue to prioritize interests of its people, and including the fact that there was no phone conversation between the two leaders. Here's a report.
After settling the Middle East conflict, US President Donald Trump is back targeting India's oil imports from Russia. In a fresh claim, Trump said Prime Minister Narendra Modi had assured him that India would stop buying oil from Russia.
But it's a war that Russia should have won.
Are you planning to meet Prime Minister Modi in Malaysia? Are you open to talks in terms of...
Yeah, sure. He's a friend of mine. We have a great relationship. He just said that 2 days ago, as you know. We have a great relationship. No, we were not happy with him buying oil from Russia, because that lets Russia continue on with this ridiculous war where they've lost 1.5 million people. So I was not happy that India was buying oil. And he assured me today that they will not be buying oil from Russia. That's a big stop.
India's continued purchase of Russian oil has also drawn economic penalties, with Trump imposing an additional 25% tariff on Indian goods, taking total levies to a steep 50%. The US president and his aides have been vocal in their criticism of India's energy ties with Moscow despite Washington's pressure. The Ministry of External Affairs released a press statement reaffirming that India's energy policy will always prioritize the needs of its people. It also mentioned that India has been steadily diversifying its energy imports. In recent years, the United States has emerged as one of the biggest suppliers of petroleum and natural gas to India. During Prime Minister Modi's visit to Washington in February, both countries agreed to further boost bilateral energy trade. However, the EMA dismissed Trump's claim.
See, on the issue of energy sourcing, we have made a statement. This was put out in the morning today. On the question of whether there was a conversation or a telephone call between Prime Minister Modi and President Trump, I am not aware of any conversation yesterday between the two leaders.
As per official figures, US is now India's 6th largest energy trade partner, including the 5th largest source of crude oil and the 2nd largest source of LNG imports. Bilateral hydrocarbons trade between India and the US has been $13.7 billion in 2023-24. While India continues to balance its energy needs and diversify supplies, Trump's stance appears contradictory. While he punishes India with 25% tariff for Russian oil purchases, Trump has refrained from acting against China, which remains the largest buyer of Russian crude, or even the European Union, which continues importing significant volumes of Russian oil. With Neha Kumari, Bureau Report, India Today.
Rohit, does DC really have a handle on what's happening between India and the United States of America on the Russian oil question? But because it does seem like President Trump is saying things that have not happened. Rohit, you're on mute. If you could unmute yourself.
It's me. Okay, can you hear me now, Geeta?
Yes.
I'm so sorry. Look, what President Trump said after in those comments, I think, holds more value in my opinion. He went ahead and tried explaining India's position as to that India cannot stop buying oil from Russia, at once, and it will be a slow process. And he understands. And he, in fact, said that, he was disappointed. But I think if you read between the lines, I think what he's trying to communicate to everybody, especially at the home audience, is that India is listening to what President Trump has been saying, his administration officials have been saying, and India is willing to work with the United States on trying to stop this war, even if it means that India has to slow down or, in totality, stop buying oil from Russia. Now, it is completely different from what we heard from MEA. In fact, as we heard from Randir Jaiswal, who said that to his knowledge, there was no phone call. So maybe President Trump was alluding to the fact that Sergio Gore, who was the ambassador in the Oval Office at that point in time, he told him that India might be willing to go that far, but it's going to be a slow process. So I think we'll have to wait and watch, Geeta. The trade delegation is in town, and we might have to wait and see how those things happen. But there is a talk of India offsetting some of these purchases from Russia by investing into America and buying energy from the US. So again, President Trump could be alluding to that as well. So we'll have to wait and watch. But clearly, different positions when you talk to different people in DC or New Delhi.
Right, and that'll be the focus, Rohit, for you. We'll keep coming back to you. The trade delegation is in DC. Keep us updated on what happens on that front. Thank you so much for joining us for now.
Thank you.
Now, US President Donald Trump has warned that he would allow Israeli forces to resume military action in Gaza if Hamas fails to comply with the ceasefire agreement. Trump said Israeli troops could return to the streets as soon as I would say the word, and that's how I quote him. His remarks came amid Israeli accusations that Hamas has violated the truce by not fully releasing the hostages, both alive and dead, as promised. The delay has sparked outrage among the Israeli government and families of those still held captive. Meanwhile, Hamas informed the International Red Cross that it may be unable to recover the bodies of all 28 hostages killed during or after October 7, 2023 attacks, citing the destruction caused by Israeli bombardments in Gaza. The return of all hostages, dead or alive, remains Israel's key condition for ending the war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to bring every hostage home.
רעייתי שרה ואני
My wife Sarah and I are hugging each and every one of you as we embrace the families of the hostages, those who have returned and those we will bring back. And we are committed to bringing them all back until the very last one.
ואלה שנשיב ארצה.
Here's an India Today Global exclusive. My colleague Pranay Upadhyay spoke with Avihai Broduch, an Israeli survivor of the October 7th, 2023 Hamas terror attack that devastated his kibbutz, Kfar Aza. During the assault, Broduch's wife, 3 children, and a neighbor's daughter were kidnapped while hundreds were killed. He recounted how his family endured 49 days in captivity in Gaza before being freed through a hostage exchange deal. Listen to the full interview or watch the full interview on our global channel on YouTube.
Avkhair, I saw some of your pictures that you went up to the Israeli Ministry of Defense protesting, asking for some kind of hostage exchange. You fought those attackers, you fought those terrorists, and still you wanted a swap or exchange. What was going through your mind at that time that you wanted your family back, but your country was already fighting that organization which is controlling that population, that Gaza Strip?
You know, we live in this conflict. My whole life, I've lived through a conflict, and I always believed in peace. I thought, you know, that a conflict should end, and I thought that it's a good point for us to make peace. I think that both sides understood that it's not the solution. You know, I thought the Palestinian people know that terrorism is not the solution, and I think that Hamas did a terrible, terrible thing, and I think that the Palestinian people in Gaza, they knew that, and I thought it was time to go for a resolution and maybe start to make peace. I'm very happy to say, you know, President Trump came to Israel a few days ago. And he started a very, very important and big thing in West Asia. And that's to bring peace to West Asia and maybe to other places in the world. I really hope this peace is going to spread around. And we got our final 20 live hostages back. And we're still waiting for the rest. We need the rest of the families so they have something they can bury. And they can go to a cemetery and mourn their dead. And we still have to keep on fighting to get those people back.
Do you still talk about you know, those days of them being in captivity, or you don't talk in your family on the dining table, or like
you know, it's our life. We talk about it all the time, every day. I lost.
What did they share with you?
They remember the names of the terrorists. So and you know, it's names of people you meet in the street. People of names, you know. So every time they hear an Arabic name, it reminds them. You know, it's not necessarily in a bad way. It's just something you live through. You know?
But certain things do leave permanent scars. So these are the emotional scars that people suffer.
Definitely. Now we are in a time, and this is thanks to President Trump again, which is I think is a huge person. And I really, really hope that's why I'm also here in India. India is a great nation with a great leadership. And I think with the help of leaders around the world, you know, we can start solving the situation in West Asia.
U.S. President Donald Trump has confirmed that he authorized the CIA to carry out covert operations in Venezuela, signaling a sharp escalation in U.S. pressure on President Nicolas Maduro's government. The New York Times had earlier reported classified directives citing U.S. officials familiar with the decision. Trump said he ordered the action for 2 reasons: the release of large numbers of prisoners, including individuals from mental health facilities, into the U.S., and often exploiting the country's open border policy, And then the trafficking of large quantities of drugs from Venezuela, much of it via the Caribbean Sea. U.S. forces have already targeted at least 5 suspected drug smuggling vessels in recent weeks, resulting in 27 deaths. Meanwhile, Nicolás Maduro addressed the American people on television, appealing for peace. He urged Washington to avoid conflict, saying, "No war, yes peace."
Why did you authorize the CIA to go into Venezuela? And is there more information you can share about these strikes on the alleged
Well, I can't do
drug boats in
that,
the
but
Caribbean?
I authorized for 2 reasons, really. Number one, they have emptied their prisons into the United States of America.
No a los golpes de Estado dados por la CIA.
No to the coups carried out by CIA that reminds us of the 30,000 people disappeared by CIA in the coups against Argentina. How long will CIA coups continue? Latin America does not want them, does not need them, and repudiates them.
América Latina no los quiere.
And on the Afghan-Pakistan border tensions, India's Ministry of External Affairs spokesperson Randeep Jaiswal addressed concerns and said that the recent cross-border escalation between Afghanistan and Pakistan are concerning. Jaiswal said India is closely monitoring the situation and remains fully committed to Afghanistan's sovereignty, territorial integrity and independence. The United Nations has also urged both countries to bring a lasting end to hostilities and protect civilians after days of fighting left dozens dead and hundreds injured on both sides. Earlier, Pakistan and Afghanistan had agreed to a ceasefire following deadly attacks along the border.
We are closely monitoring the situation. 3 things are clear. One, that Pakistan hosts terrorist organizations and sponsors terrorist activities. 2, it is an old practice of Pakistan to blame its neighbors for its own internal failures. And 3, Pakistan is infuriated with Afghanistan exercising sovereignty over its own territories. India remains fully committed to the sovereignty, territorial integrity, and independence of Afghanistan.
Pakistan is not only facing problems at the border, but within as well. At a time when the U.S. is expanding the scope of Abraham Accords after the Israel-Hamas peace agreement, they've been seeking normalization of ties with Israel and with many other Islamic nations, including Pakistan. And Islamabad now finds itself between the devil and the deep sea. Can Pakistan ever be part of the Abraham Accords? And are the recent TLP protests part of a larger establishment plan? Watch a part of that entire episode of Statecraft here right now, but you can watch the full episode on India Today Global's YouTube channel. Pakistan finds itself at the crossroads of faith and foreign policy. On one hand, US President Donald Trump's new West Asia peace plan, expanding the Abraham Accords, promises Islamabad a seat at the global diplomatic table. On the other, Pakistan's streets are once again flooded with protests over Gaza, led by the same hardline groups long accused of being tools of the deep state. As Washington pushes for peace and Pakistan's generals weigh recognition of Israel, the timing of these so-called Gaza protests seem more than coincidental. Are they a genuine outpouring of solidarity or a carefully orchestrated move to help Pakistan quietly back out of a deal with Trump? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. Can Pakistan join the Abraham Accords? A question that seemed unthinkable once now lies at the center of a diplomatic storm. Barely weeks after Donald Trump unveiled his Gaza peace plan, Pakistan found itself listed among the Muslim nations backing the initiative. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif was photographed smiling with Trump, praising his plan for peace and even tweeting his support. But within days, Islamabad's streets were on fire, and leading the chaos was not the opposition, but a familiar army-linked force, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik Pakistan. This is not the first time Pakistan's deep state has weaponized religion to rewrite geopolitics. But this time, the stakes are higher, because the prize is historic. The Abraham Accords, once seen as a US-Israel-Arab alignment, now holds a new goal: reshaping the Muslim world's relationship with Israel. For Trump, Pakistan's inclusion would have been a masterstroke. For Pakistan, it would have been a diplomatic earthquake. And yet, just as the world began imagining a new dawn in Pakistan-Israel ties, Gaza returned to Pakistani politics. The same slogans, the same outrage, the same street theater. Only this time, the timing was too perfect to ignore. Days after Trump's press conference with Netanyahu, Pakistan's streets erupted. Tens of thousands of Tehreek-e-Labbaik supporters marched toward the US embassy in Islamabad in protest of Israel's actions in Gaza. But Gaza was quiet. The ceasefire was holding. Hostages had been released. Palestinians themselves were celebrating peace. The protests were not about Gaza. They were about Rawalpindi. Because behind the chaos, there was strategy. Pakistan's military establishment had been under quiet American pressure to join the Abraham Accords, according to some reports. And Trump's team, emboldened by his West Asia peace victories, wanted Islamabad on board. But Pakistan's generals know their street politics better than anyone else. To reject Washington outright would be costly. To ignite religious protests and then cite domestic instability as the reason for delay was far safer. What began as a fringe religious movement suddenly became the army's most convenient street weapon. The TLP rose to the limelight suddenly in 2017 during protests against the then Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif. He had angered the army with intentions to repair relations with India. The issue split over even after Sharif was forced out. The group's current protests over Gaza are eerily similar to past performances. In 2020, they demanded the closure of the French embassy over cartoons of the Prophet. In 2022, they helped destabilize Imran Khan's government. Each time, their sudden rise coincided with shifts in Pakistan's foreign policy or internal military politics. This time, the script has changed. The target is Washington's plan for peace in West Asia. The reality is stark. Pakistan faces economic collapse, with foreign reserves hovering at historic lows. US aid and Saudi investment remain crucial lifelines. The Strategic Defense Agreement with Riyadh, signed just days before the Gaza protests, could unlock billions in joint projects. But that cooperation hinges on Islamabad aligning with the US-Saudi-Israel peace framework, which means rejecting Trump's plan isn't just about foreign policy, it's about Pakistan's survival. Protests led by Gen Z are shaking governments from South America to Africa, from Peru to Madagascar, which led to a coup. Here's how the new generation's rage is redrawing the global political map.
Peru is once again in turmoil, and this time it's Gen Z leading the charge. In Lima, what started as peaceful youth-led demonstrations has spiraled into deadly unrest. One protester was killed and more than 100 others injured as security forces clashed with demonstrators near the Congress building. The protesters, mostly young Peruvians, artists and student groups, are angry over rising crime, corruption and what they call a political elite that has lost touch with reality. President Jose Herri, who only took office a few days ago after the impeachment of Dina Boluarte, now faces a legitimacy crisis of his own. His promise to declare war on organized crime hasn't eased the anger or the violence. As night fell, protesters tried to storm barricades, throwing stones and lighting fireworks. Police responded with tear gas. Many say they have simply had enough of extortion, murders, and insecurity that have become part of daily life in Peru. Experts say Gen Z is driving this movement, disillusioned but determined, demanding real change from leaders they no longer trust. And the unrest isn't confined to South America. In Madagascar, another wave of youth-led protest has shaken the country, this time ending in a military coup. The African Union has suspended Madagascar after Colonel Michael Randrianirina seized power, forcing President Andry Rajoelina into exile. The African Union says, and I quote, "The rule of law must prevail over the rule of force," unquote. But on the streets, the message from young protesters is clear. They are tired of corruption and broken promises. From Lima to Madagascar, Gen Z is making itself heard. And their message is echoing loud and clear. Enough is enough. With Jyoti Shukla, Bureau Report, India Today Global.
That's all on this edition of India Today Global. Stay tuned to India Today for all the latest news and updates. Goodbye and take care.